Let's go now. A little life out here. What the hell's going on out here? Hey, what about that now?
Hello everybody, welcome to the UK Packers podcast. As usual, I'm your host, that's the NFL on Twitter, and of course follow the group at UK Packers. And what a time to be a Packers fan, damn! Unbelievable, we're at that stage again, aren't we, of fandom where we come into a game and we're like, yeah, it's a win, it's one in the dub column. What does that mean though? That means that this is a trap game, right? But anyway, before we get ahead of ourselves, quick snaps! Oh, quick pause for your big, you doing it? Oh, for God's sake, I really hope you're doing it. Do it in the car, do it at the office. Extra kudos if you do it in work. All right, for sitting there with your headphones on, giving a clicky click. So let's jump into it. It's great to be a Packers fan. We're coming into games thinking that we're going to win. Yay. We're high up on offensive scoring. Our defense is balling out. It's a really unique time, I think, to be a Packers fan because there was always that sort of, feast or famine, wasn't there? Rodgers was scoring ridiculous amounts. We had the highest scoring offense in the league, but our defense was crap in the bed. And one would always compensate for the other. And we've really only had one or two games that were kind of dodgy this year, right? We've the Dallas game where the defense gave up a lot. We had the Browns game where the offense couldn't score. But there hasn't really been a lot of that. It was kind of teething pains. And when we looked into the stats, a million times as to why that's happening. But now we're on a team where our quarterback is winning Offensive Player of the Week. And then it just got announced before the podcast that Micah Parsons won the NFC Defensive Player of the Month, which is unbelievable. The second time that he's won it. And again, of course, and they're Bears fans, right? Let me just put that out there. But when you look at it and you see his stats and his tackles and his sacks and all that kind of jazz, we have some people cribbing and moaning about that there's other people out there with higher numbers. That's what happens when you get lost in stats. And don't get me wrong, Micah Parsons' stats are incredible, but the pressures that he's had, the impact that he's had on the game, how he's elevated a defense that we're already kind of high on, that we're thinking was going to be great. And now he's come in and he's made everybody around him better. Look at Rashan Gary. We always wanted him to take that step up, and that's kind of freed him up. And look, it's a bit of column A and column B, right? I think Micah Parsons is fantastic, but because he has the cast of characters like Devontae Wyatt when he came back even, Wooden, Carl Brooks, Rashan Gary, Lucas Van Ness when he was out playing, and unfortunately there's no sort of update on his injury. All of these players all coming together. Edgerrin Cooper, the list could go on, and I think they complement each other very well, but Micah Parsons has elevated that game and elevated everybody around him. He's a big personality, big leader. There's a reason why the Packers gave up first-round picks and made him the highest non-quarterback paid player, if that's the right order of words, in the league. And it's great to see Packers players get these accolades because we typically don't, right? I mean, you look at the MVP candidates that are running, and an awful lot of that feeds into the fan narrative. And I think Aaron Rodgers absolutely deserved it that time when he won it when Jordan Love was drafted. But there was a campaign on the Pat McAfee show that was kind of pushing him to the forefront. Now, like I said, he completely deserved it. I don't think it was biased. But my point is that for some reason, especially when you play for Green Bay, I don't know whether it's the location in Green Bay and it's not one of the, well, it's not seen as the big sexy market of Dallas, and the Kansas City Chiefs get all the headlines. It's hard for a Packers player sometimes to stand out despite the fact that they're amazing. I mean, the proof in the pie and in the pudding is that and you'll know this if you're listening and you're a diehard Packers fan, when you go to talk to somebody, you say, oh, Green Bay Packers, people go, who? Where are they from? And the clue's in the name. But they don't know where Green Bay is. They're not particularly familiar with where Wisconsin is. And that sort of works with the players too. And look, it's not a dig at Wisconsin and Green Bay. In fact, I really love that idea of that. Not an awful lot of people know, but when you're a player, it sort of works against you, right? Because that's why these players, you'll find that if they want to be marketable and business people, and I'm a businessman, not a businessman, that thing. So it's that, they want to go to markets like Dallas and New York where they can market themselves and have that visibility, whereas Green Bay, it's all about ball, which is great because the guys get to focus on it. So look, I've suppose I've talked it to death here, but it's great to see Packers players get the accolades, and that performance of Jordan Love was just sensational as well. Sensational. Let's talk about this game in particular against the Panthers. So it's at home in Lambeau Field. It's at 6 p.m. UK time, 12 p.m. Wisco time. And the Packers come into this spread faves, which is a lot. And I always balk at this type of margin because it never sort of works out that way. Also, it is set up to be one of those trap games, not because of superstition or something like that, but when you're on a roll like the Packers are, you're getting that confidence in throwing the ball. Sometimes you can get hiccups along the way. And I mean, the number one team to ask about this type of inconsistency is, in fact, the Panthers themselves. You just look at their scoring in various games, and it's just all over the place. They lost to the Jaguars to open the season. They lost to the Cardinals. They won against the Falcons, and it was a shutout. They scored 30 points. The Falcons didn't score at all. Then they lost to the Patriots. They won against the Dolphins. They beat the Cowboys, who we had that famous tie of 40-40. They beat them 30-27. And there's some interesting stats behind that. They win against the Jets, but they can only score 13 points. And then they get blown out at home versus the Bills, 40-9 in the last game. Now, there's reasons for that too, in the fact that Young wasn't a quarterback. Not that that would really make a difference because he's very hot and cold this season, but he had a high ankle sprain in that game against the Cowboys, so he was out. And Dalton came in and he was sacked, I believe, 7 times, and it was a bit of a nightmare. But if you just go down through the scoring on offense for them, it goes like this: 10 points, 22, 30, 13, 27, 30, 13, and then 9. So, and again, on one of those 13 games, they actually won, right? Because they come up against the Jets, so go figure. So, look, they're a very sporadic, inconsistent team. They're very one-sided when it comes to offense. You know, usually, and like you see with us is a bit crazy where you have Tucker Kraft being the top receiver for us, and then the ball is kind of spread out. That's not because we're, you know, single-minded and we just go to Kraft, although I think that will start leaning that way if he keeps performing the way he does throughout the season and just that yak total. But again, yak is very deceiving, right? Because yes, it's to do with technique and it's Tucker Kraft and his body size and his ability and his strong arms and all this type of stuff. However, if you have a good defense who wrap up and are on him quickly, well, then he's not going to get that yards after catch. It's deceiving because you look at it and go, brilliant, but then you start to question, well, why is he getting the ball so shallow and then having to make up those yards? And had he not done that, the outcome of some games would be an awful lot different. So it's a good and a bad thing. So, you know, the Packers offense is very balanced, and with Christian Watson coming back now, it's even more balanced in the fact that we can stretch the field. You can certainly use Matthew Golden as some sort of a threat, and then Christian Watson. I mean, to say he had the injury that he did, he came back well ahead of schedule, and then he comes down with the numbers that he did. And yes, not super duper spectacular 200 yards, but 84 yards, I believe it was, in the last game. Some of those big yardage, some of that stuff on third down, which was brilliant. It gives the Packers an option. And when you let Jordan Love loose and he goes down the field like that, it's pretty fantastic. So we're coming up against the Panthers team who are one-sided when it comes to passing, and that's to go to their first-round pick, McMillan. He leads the team with 512 yards, and he's about 400 yards ahead of everybody else. So, you know, the game plan when it comes to the passing attack is quite simple. You cover McMillan and you make them one-sided. Not only that, but, you know, Bryce Young's coming into the game. We believe it's not going to be Dalton. He's coming in with an ankle injury, which would mean that he might not be that mobile. And the Packers are very, very good at getting pressure on. Now, look, obviously the danger area there is that if Young decides to air the ball out, and again, I don't believe he's got over 200 yards a game since maybe week 2, and they even lost in that game when he played his best ball. You know, it's not looking good for the Panthers, and if they air the ball out against their secondary, they will be tested, but I don't think the test is massively there. The number one way that we're going to be tested in this game is who they have at running back, a guy who came in behind Chuba Hubbard, who, you know, you'd look at him and go, oh, you know, they're not going to do a whole lot with him, but he's absolutely balled out. So this guy called Rico Dowdle, and if you look at some of the scores that he's notched up against Miami in that 27-24 win, he had 206 rushing yards, and then he added another 28 yards to that in passing and 1 rushing touchdown. And then in the game following that against Dallas, they won 30-27. He had 30 carries, which was 7 more than the game before, for 183 yards. And again, he came away with 56 receiving yards for 1 receiving touchdown. So again, his averages in the last few games have been absolutely bonkers. I mean, against Miami, it was 9 yards per carry, 6.1 against Dallas, 4.6 against the New York Jets, and then 6.8 against the Buffalo Bills. But the thing is, I mean, against the Bills, because they were getting blown out, they couldn't go to the run game. They had to abandon it, which is why they didn't. But as you can see, it was absolutely working. A long of 24, 6.8 average. You'd want to go to him as much as possible. And the Packers have been beaten by running backs. Now, again, I think we've got the 3rd best run defense in the league. But when you come up against players that you don't expect to give up yardage to, we did. I mean, against the Cardinals, we gave up yardage to Bam Knight. He was the 4th string. And against the Steelers, we gave up chunk yardage there as well. So, we are capable of being ran on. Although Micah Parsons is shockingly good against the run, despite what Jerry Jones likes to say. So I think it's a real one-sided game. Now, will it be 13.5 points one-sided? Maybe, but it all depends on the Packers getting a fast start. If you look at the sort of, bird's eye view of how these teams stack up against each other, the points per game for the Packers are 27.6, which is 5th in the league, whereas the Panthers have 19.2, and that's 27th. But like I said, it's been so sporadic. There's times where they've scored 13 points and 9 points, but then again, they're blowing the Falcons out 30-0. It's hard to know what you get with this team. Yards per game, we're 7th, they're 20th. When it comes to time of possession, they're better than us, but that makes sense entirely because they'll try run-out games, particularly with Dowdle when he's in there. When it comes to defense, we're much better. We're, top 12 when it comes to sacks, whereas they're in the bottom side of the league, 26th. But in interceptions, they're quite opportunistic, and this is one of the areas where they might get to us. They're not good at getting pressure on the quarterback. And that bodes well for us with Jordan Love and his franchise equaling Brett Favre 20 passes in a row. Not unless something really weird happens, but we all know he's rather unflappable, right? Whereas this is one point that if Jordan Love is forced into making some throws, which is no evidence that he will be put under severe pressure with their offensive line playing quite well and their defensive line not playing all that great. But they are opportunistic when it comes down with interceptions, so I don't think the Packers will have it all their way when it comes to this game. But look, at a glance, the Packers' offense should stack up an awful lot better. When it comes to the run, the Panthers have been kind of so-so with stopping it, but we've seen Josh Jacobs take a bit of a dip. I won't say a dip in form, right, because he's injured and he's nursing that injury. He's on a snap count, and that probably won't change as the season progresses until he starts to get a bit healthier and they hold him out. But Emmanuel Wilson was an absolute revelation in that last game. Didn't punch the ball into the end zone, but was absolutely fantastic. So I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing and keep them honest with the run. But the Packers have so many offensive weapons. Their defense is flying high. And we come up against the Panthers. I mean, on paper, record-wise, there's only one game between these teams, really. The Panthers come into this game 4-4. The Packers are 5-1-1. However, the difference being that the Packers are sitting top of their division and top of the NFC as well. So look, it's all for the Packers to play for. This is one of those games that is seen as kind of easier on paper. This is the game we have before our unbelievable tour to Lambeau Field. We go over and face the Eagles, which is the second game at home in a row. And that will be a real tester and a real acid test as to where this team is. So the Packers should definitely beat the Panthers, and I think it'll be a very sketchy, dodgy time if we don't. But the Panthers are even saying it. This is the NFL. They get blown out by the Patriots 24-13 straight after hosting the Falcons at home and shutting them out entirely. And then they beat the Dolphins, then they beat the Cowboys, then they beat the Jets, and then they get blown out by the Bills 40-9. So they're so inconsistent, but the NFL in itself is just a bit of a bizarre place to be. But we believe in the Packers. It's a massive Go Pack Go. I am at SteedyTheNFL, at the Paddy Packer on other socials, and we are at UK Packers. That has been quick snaps and the quick roundup. Again, the last thing I'll sort of part with is that we give away this trip to Lambeau Field, and Garrett Hodgson, who won it. And again, you can get into that draw for $5. And you can win yourself an all-expenses-paid trip to Lambeau Field. And not only that, I'm musing with trying to organise a Manchester meetup. An awful lot of people have been asking the obvious question, is that when are we going to do it? I have my sights set on the Vikings around the 23rd, I believe, of November, which is very soon, or pushing it to early December and maybe, picking up the Bears game. we'll see. But if we do host it, there's a venue that we go to in Manchester that's fantastic, and we'll be working with them again, touch wood, and that will be an absolutely blockbuster event, and we've a lot of fans in Manchester too, so I'd love to see you there if it all comes to fruition. So mark it and pencil it in pencil for now in your diaries, and hopefully we'll come back with some good news that can be booked and ready to go ahead. Anyway, that's Quick Snaps. I'm at Steedy the NFL. We're at the UK Packers. Follow along on all socials while we watch this game, and hopefully it lives up to expectation. Go Pack, go.